Ellen's dismissive jab at Jasmine Crockett's attitude ignites a fiery clash on live TV as the Congresswoman flips the script, exposing raw truths about race and respect that leave the studio stunned. Jasmine Crockett sat in her hotel room, staring at the email from the Ellen DeGeneres show. An invitation to appear on the iconic talk show was a big deal, but the fine print of her gut told her to tread carefully. As a black congresswoman known for her sharp tongue and unapologetic stance, she'd learned to navigate spaces where her presence could be weaponized or misunderstood. Ellen's team had pitched a fun, light-hearted chat about her rising political career, but Jasmine wasn't naive. She'd seen how black women's assertiveness got spun into attitude on platforms like this, and Ellen's history of subtle shade in interviews didn't escape her. Still, this was a chance to reach millions, to humanize her fight for justice. She accepted, but not without a plan. Her team prepped her for days. They watched old Ellen episodes, noting how the host's playful banter could pivot into probing questions that caught guests off guard. Jasmine's chief of staff, Marla, was blunt. She'll try to keep it cute, but if she senses strength, she might poke. Don't let her frame you as the angry black woman. Jasmine nodded, her mind racing. She'd faced worse, hostile committee hearings, racist trolls online, but this was different. Ellen's stage was a cultural juggernaut, and one misstep could define her to a world that already had its biases locked and loaded. The morning of the taping, Jasmine arrived at the studio in Burbank, her navy blazer crisp, her locks swept into an elegant updo. The backstage vibe was warm but polished, with staff buzzing around like worker bees. Ellen's producer greeted her with a megawatt smile, rattling off the segment rundown. A quick intro, some banter about Congress, maybe a goofy dance. Jasmine smiled back, but her eyes scanned the room. She clocked the audience demographic, mostly white, middle-aged female, and the crew's subtle glances. She was used to being the only black woman in the room, but the weight of it never eased. When she met Ellen backstage, the host was all charm, her signature grin in full effect. "Jasmine, you're gonna kill it out there," Ellen said, her voice bubbly. "Love your energy already." Jasmine returned a polite chuckle, but something in Ellen's tone, a hint of condescension, pinged her radar. Was it real, or was she overthinking? No time to dwell. The stage manager called her to places, and the show's theme music blared. The lights hit like a spotlight on Judgment Day. Ellen bounded onto the stage, arms wide, soaking in the crowd's cheers. Jasmine followed, her smile measured but warm, waving as the applause swelled. They sat, and Ellen leaned in, her blue eyes gleaming. "So, Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman extraordinaire, welcome. You're shaking things up in D.C., aren't you?" The crowd whooped, and Jasmine laughed, easing into the rhythm. "I'm just trying to get the work done, Ellen. You know, fighting for folks who don't always get a voice." The first few minutes were smooth. Ellen lobbed softballs about Jasmine's journey from lawyer to legislator, and Jasmine answered, with wit, sharing stories of her Texas roots and her passion for equity. The audience ate it up, clapping at her one-liners. But then Ellen shifted gears, her tone still playful but edged. "You've got this reputation, Jasmine, for being, like, super assertive. Some might even say you've got a bit of an attitude. What's that about?" The word attitude landed like a pebble in a still pond, rippling through the studio. The audience tittered, and Jasmine's smile tightened. She felt the trap snap shut. Ellen's question wasn't innocent. It was a dog whistle, a way to paint her as the stereotype without saying it outright. Jasmine's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed steady. "Ellen, let's unpack that. When you say attitude, what do you mean? Because I hear that word thrown at women like me a lot, and it's rarely about how we talk. It's about the fact that we talk at all." The crowd's laughter fizzled, replaced by a tense hush. Ellen blinked, her grin faltering for a split second. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes locked on the host. "I'm assertive because I have to be. People's lives depend on it. But somehow when a black woman speaks up, it's attitude. Why is that?" The studio air crackled with tension as Jasmine Crockett held Ellen's gaze, her words slicing through the host's attempt to pivot. Ellen's mouth hung open for a beat, her usual quick wit stalling under the weight of Jasmine's challenge. The audience shifted in their seats, a mix of discomfort and intrigue rippling through the crowd. Jasmine wasn't here to play Ellen's game. She was rewriting the rules. Ellen recovered, leaning back with a forced chuckle. "Whoa, Jasmine, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant you've got this big personality, you know. It's a compliment." Her voice was light, but her eyes darted to the producer off stage, a silent plea for a lifeline. The crowd laughed nervously, unsure where this was going. Jasmine didn't budge. "A compliment?" she said, her tone calm but razor-sharp. "Ellen, let's be real. You didn't call my personality big when you interviewed other guests who speak their mind. You called it attitude for me. Words matter. They shape how people see me, especially as a black woman in a world quick to judge." The studio fell silent, the kind of quiet that swallows sound. Ellen's smile tightened, her fingers tapping the armrest. She was used to steering conversations, not being steered. "Okay, fair point," she said, her voice a touch defensive. "But I'm all about positivity here. Can't we just keep it fun?" The plea for levity was a classic Ellen move, but Jasmine wasn't biting. "Fun's great, Ellen, but not when it dodges the truth. You asked about my attitude, so let's talk about it. Why is my confidence a problem? Why does it get a label that others don't?" The audience murmured, some nodding, others exchanging glances. A few clapped, emboldened by Jasmine's clarity. Ellen's producer signaled from the wings, urging her to pivot, but the host doubled down, her tone sharpening. "I'm not labeling you, Jasmine. I'm just saying how people perceive you. You're in Congress. You know how tough perceptions can be." It was a jab disguised as empathy, and Jasmine caught it. "Perceptions?" she said, her voice rising just enough to command the room. "Perceptions don't come from nowhere, Ellen. They're built by moments like this, by questions, that frame my strength as something to question, not celebrate." The crowd erupted in applause, louder now, feeding off Jasmine's fire. Ellen's face flushed, her control slipping. She leaned forward, trying to reclaim the narrative. "Look, I get it. I'm not the enemy here. I've had plenty of women on this show. Black women, white women, all kinds. I'm just asking what everyone's thinking." The deflection was clumsy, and Jasmine pounced. "Everyone? Ellen, you're speaking for your audience now? Because I see people here who get what I'm saying." She gestured to the crowd, where pockets of cheers broke out. "You say you're not the enemy, but when you toss out words, like attitude without checking why they sting, you're part of the problem." Ellen's jaw tightened, her trademark charm crumbling. The studio felt like a pressure cooker, every word a spark threatening to ignite. Backstage, the crew exchanged panicked looks. Nobody had prepped for this. Jasmine's team, watching from the green room, gripped their phones, already seeing the viral potential. Marla whispered, "She's turning this into a masterclass." But Jasmine wasn't thinking about optics. She was in the moment, fueled by years of navigating rooms that tried to shrink her. Ellen tried to pivot again, her voice strained. "Jasmine, I hear you. Let's talk solutions. What do you want people to take away from this?" It was a peace offering, but Jasmine wasn't ready to let the tension dissolve. "I want people to stop weaponizing our strength," she said, her eyes fierce. "I want black women to be seen as leaders, not caricatures. And I want folks like you, with platforms like this, to think before you speak." The audience roared, some standing, their energy tilting the room in Jasmine's favor. Ellen's smile was gone now, replaced by a thin line. She glanced at the clock. Minutes left in the segment. She could cut to commercial, but the cameras were still rolling, and the world was watching. Jasmine sat back, composed but unyielding, knowing she just cracked open a conversation that wouldn't end here. Ellen's thin-lipped stare betrayed her discomfort as the studio clock ticked down, the cameras capturing every second of the standoff. Jasmine Crockett's poised intensity held the room hostage, her challenge to Ellen's framing of her attitude still echoing. The audience, now a live wire of anticipation, leaned into the tension, their cheers for Jasmine lingering. Like a dare, Ellen, cornered on her own stage, had to respond, but the playbook she'd relied on for years was failing her. She cleared her throat, her voice tight but measured. "Jasmine, I'm not trying to weaponize anything, I'm just having a conversation. Isn't that what you want? Open dialogue?" It was a calculated move, flipping the script to paint Jasmine as the aggressor. The crowd stirred, some murmuring in agreement, others shaking their heads. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, catching the sleight of hand. "Dialogue's only open if it's honest, Ellen," she shot back, her tone steady but piercing. "You framed my strength as attitude, and then acted like it's just a word. It's not. It's a judgment one black women face every day. If you want dialogue, own that." The audience erupted again, louder, their applause a mix of support and shock. Ellen's producer, visible in the wings, gestured frantically, mouthing, "Wrap it up," but Ellen ignored her. She leaned forward, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "I'm owning that I asked a question, Jasmine. I didn't mean to offend, but you're making this about race when it's about personality. Not everything is a battle." The words landed like a misfired arrow, and a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jasmine's face didn't flinch, but her eyes burned with focus. "Ellen, you just proved my point," Jasmine said, her voice low but commanding. "You say it's not about race, but you don't get to decide that. When you call my personality attitude and not, say, bold, like you did for other guests, that's a choice. And it's a choice rooted in a system that's been boxing in black women for centuries." The crowd roared, some standing, their energy surging. A woman in the front row shouted, "Tell her!" and Jasmine gave a subtle nod, drawing strength from the support. Ellen's face reddened, her fingers gripping the armrest. "I'm not boxing anyone in," she said, her voice rising. "I've spent my career lifting people up. You're twisting this into something it's not." The defensiveness cracked her polished veneer, and the audience sensed it, their murmurs growing restless. Jasmine didn't let up. "Lifting people up doesn't mean you're immune to blind spots, Ellen. You've got a platform that shapes narratives. When you dismiss what I'm saying as twisting, you're shutting down the truth. That's not lifting. That's silencing." The studio was electric, the air thick with the weight of Jasmine's words. Backstage, the crew stood frozen, some whispering about the social media storm already brewing. Jasmine's team, watching, from the green room, exchanged looks of awe and nerves. Marla muttered, "She's rewriting history right now." But Jasmine was in the zone, her years of courtroom battles and congressional sparring fueling her precision. She wasn't just confronting Ellen, she was dismantling a narrative that had gone unchecked for too long. Ellen, visibly rattled, tried to pivot. "Okay, Jasmine, I hear you. Let's talk about your work then. Tell us about your latest bill in Congress." It was a desperate attempt to steer back to safer ground, but Jasmine wasn't done. "We can talk about my work, but we're not glossing over this," she said, her voice firm. "You asked about my attitude, and I'm answering. If we're going to talk about my bills, let's talk about why they're needed. Because black women like me have to fight twice as hard to be heard. Even on stages like this." The crowd's cheers drowned out Ellen's attempt to interject, their energy tilting the room further toward Jasmine. Ellen's eyes flicked to the clock. Again, seconds left. She could end the segment, but Jasmine's momentum was unstoppable, her words carving a path that demanded reckoning. As the tension peaked, Jasmine leaned forward, her gaze unyielding, ready to push the conversation into uncharted territory. The studio vibrated with the crowd's cheers, their fervor fueling Jasmine Crockett's unyielding stare as she leaned into Ellen DeGeneres, her words a blade cutting through the host's faltering defenses. Ellen's glance at the clock was a tell. Seconds remained, but Jasmine's momentum was a freight train, and the audience was riding it. The energy had shifted irrevocably. The room no longer Ellen's playground but a battleground for truth. Jasmine's voice, steady and deliberate, sliced through the noise. "Ellen, you can't pivot away from this. You opened the door, and I'm walking through it. Let's talk about why black women's voices are always the ones you question, always the ones you label." Ellen's face tightened, her hands clenching in her lap. The cameras, relentless, caught every micro-expression, broadcasting her discomfort to millions. "Jasmine, I'm not questioning your voice," she said, her tone sharp, betraying her frustration. "I'm giving you a platform. You're here, aren't you? But you keep turning this into something personal when it's just a talk show." The crowd's murmurs grew jagged, some booing softly, others clapping for Jasmine. Ellen's attempt to reclaim control was slipping through her fingers like sand. Jasmine's eyes flashed, her composure a steel trap. "A platform doesn't mean a free pass, Ellen. You invited me here, but you set the tone with attitude. That's personal. It's personal to every black woman who's been told her strength is a problem." She paused, letting the words sink in, the audience hanging on her every syllable. "You say it's just a talk show, but this is where culture gets shaped. You don't get to toss out loaded words and then act surprised when I call them out." "They," crowd roared, a wave of applause crashing over Ellen's strained smile. A man in the back shouted, "Preach!" and others joined, their voices a chorus of validation. Ellen's producer, now pacing off stage, signaled desperately to cut, but the segment was live, and the world was glued to the screen. Jasmine's team in the green room watched, breathless, as Marla whispered, "She's not just winning, she's changing the game." But Jasmine wasn't thinking about victory. She was thinking about every time she'd been misjudged, every stereotype she'd had to dismantle, and she was done letting it slide. Ellen, cornered, tried a different tack, her voice softer but laced with defiance. "Jasmine, I respect you. I do. But you're assuming I meant harm, and that's not fair. I've had tons of guests, and I ask tough questions. It's my job." The plea for fairness was a Hail Mary, but Jasmine saw through it. "Tough questions are fine, Ellen, but they're not all equal," she countered, her voice rising with controlled fury. "You didn't ask your last guest about their attitude. You asked me. Why? Because I'm a black woman who doesn't shrink? Because I don't fit your script?" The audience's cheers surged again, some standing, their energy a tidal wave. Ellen's eyes widened, her composure fraying. "That's not what I'm doing," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You're putting words in my mouth and I don't appreciate it." The outburst was raw, a rare glimpse of Ellen unfiltered, and the crowd gasped, the tension spiking. Jasmine didn't flinch. "I'm not putting words anywhere, Ellen. I'm repeating yours. You said attitude. Own it. Or better yet, learn from it." The studio was a powder keg, every word a spark. Backstage, the crew stood paralyzed, phones buzzing with notifications as clips of the exchange flooded social media. Ellen's team scrambled, already drafting damage control statements, but the narrative was out of their hands. Jasmine, unwavering, pressed on. "This isn't just about you, Ellen. It's about a system that lets these moments happen, that cheers when black women are sassy, but flinches when we're serious. I'm here to say we're done being your punchline." Ellen's face was a mask of barely contained anger, her fingers tapping a frantic rhythm. The clock was nearly at 0, the segment's end looming, but Jasmine's words hung heavy, demanding a response. The audience, now fully in Jasmine's corner, waited. their silence a challenge. Ellen opened her mouth, her next move a mystery, as the confrontation teetered on the edge of explosion. Ellen's fingers froze mid-tap, her mask of anger cracking as Jasmine Crockett's challenge hung in the air. The studio's silence a deafening demand for accountability. The clock was seconds from zero, but the weight of the moment pinned everyone, audience, crew, viewers at home, to Jasmine's unyielding gaze. Ellen's mouth opened, her voice strained, teetering between defiance and retreat. "Jasmine, I'm sorry if I offended you," she said, the words clipped, her eyes avoiding the Congresswoman's. "That wasn't my intent. Can we move forward?" It was an olive branch, brittle and half-hearted, and the crowd's low murmur signaled they weren't buying it. Jasmine's expression didn't soften. "An apology's a start, Ellen, but if doesn't cut it," she said, her voice calm, but ironclad. "You didn't offend me. You diminished me. And not just me, but every black woman who's been labeled instead of listened to. Moving forward means owning that, not sidestepping it." The audience erupted, their cheers a thunderclap, some leaping to their feet. A woman in the crowd yelled, "Speak, Jasmine!" and the energy surged, a tidal wave of support that drowned Ellen's attempt to deflect. Ellen's face flushed, her control shattered. "I'm not sidestepping," she snapped, her voice raw. "I said I'm sorry. What more do you want?" The outburst was a misstep, and the crowd's boos swelled, sharp and unforgiving. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes locked on Ellen's. "I want you to understand, Ellen. Understand why your words carry weight. Understand why attitude isn't just a word. It's a weapon when it's used to box us in. That's what accountability looks like." Her words were a scalpel, precise and unsparing, and the audience roared, their applause shaking the studio. The segment's final seconds ticked away, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing the raw aftermath. Ellen, visibly shaken, tried to salvage the moment. "Okay, Jasmine, I hear you. I'll think about that. Let's give it up for Congresswoman Crockett, everyone." She forced a smile, clapping weakly, but the audience's ovation was for Jasmine alone, their cheers a testament to her triumph. Jasmine nodded to the crowd, her composure unbroken, her message delivered with unshakable clarity. As the show cut to its closing credits, the studio buzzed with aftershocks. Backstage, Ellen's team huddled, faces grim, already fielding calls from PR firms as clips of the confrontation exploded online. Jasmine's team in the green room was electric, Marla hugging her phone as tweets poured in. "Jasmine Crockett just schooled Ellen," and black women deserve respect. Period. The exchange went viral within hours, hashtags like Jasmine Speaks and Own Your Words trending globally. Commentators dissected the moment, praising Jasmine's poise and calling out Ellen's missteps, sparking a broader debate about race, gender, and power in media. Jasmine left the studio with her head high, ignoring the flurry of reporters outside. In the car she exhaled, the weight of the day settling. Marla, scrolling through her phone, grinned. "You didn't just confront Ellen, you started a movement." Jasmine smiled faintly, her mind already on the work ahead. The fallout for Ellen was swift. Her team issued a statement promising reflection and growth, but the public wasn't so forgiving. Viewers questioned her authenticity, and sponsors whispered about distancing themselves. Ellen's brand, once untouchable, now bore scars from a reckoning she hadn't seen coming. Jasmine, meanwhile, was flooded with support. Activists, politicians, and everyday people hailed her as a voice for the voiceless. Invitations poured in, keynotes, panels, even a potential book deal. But she stayed focused, channeling the momentum into her advocacy for equity. The confrontation became a cultural touchstone, a moment when a black woman's truth refused to be silenced, reshaping how strength was seen and respected. Jasmine didn't revel in the victory. She saw it as a step, not a summit. As she told a reporter days later, this wasn't about winning a fight. It was about demanding a world where black women don't have to fight to be heard. The world, still buzzing from her words, was listening.